And welcome everybody. Those of you who are just coming in, please feel free to, wow, they're piling in. Hello, hello, hello. So go ahead and in the chat, let me just double check that I set the chat up so that y'all can chat to everyone. Attendees can chat with everyone.
Closed caption.
Yep, and I've got to do closed captions. And so hopefully everybody can use the, oh good. So you can use closed captions. I do need to set this up to live stream on the Facebook and then we'll get started. So excited to have everybody here. All right, show my timeline, go live. Should be live streaming. Yeah, you see it?
Yep, we're on.
All right, perfect. Yay. Just make sure I have my volume off and okay. All right. So welcome everybody. We are delighted to have you all here, and we have 12 people who are in attendance tonight, plus the panelists. This is probably one of the largest groups of folks we've had. Super excited that y'all are here, but I want to start first. So here's the thing. Jody and I are just going to do a couple little pieces of information. Then we're going to introduce our panelists and we're going to let go of the microphones. Every once in a while, we might have a question or we might have an aha or we might have a gratitude, but it's going to be for Deborah and for Cecilia to have the stage basically. Okay. So first of all, I just want to start with saying that all land is Indigenous land, that all races, genders, cultures, abilities, sexual orientations are valued here, heard here, accepted here, and welcome here. We ask that we all help to create a safe space where people can land softly. And by the people, I mean our panelists, Deborah and Cecilia. It is critical that everybody who's attending, whether you're on Facebook, on YouTube, or here in our webinar, that you understand that we've created the space for our panelists to be able to share what's in their hearts and minds. This is not a place to disagree. This is not a place to argue, because these are their experiences and their feelings. And so we just ask for that respect for our panelists. We all have opinions. We all have experiences. We all have ways we've been grown up and treated or mistreated. And so if there's anything you put in the chat, I would like it to be filled with love and compassion and courage, kudos or kudo courage to Deborah and to Cecilia, because they are truly magnificent humans. I know Cecilia more closely than I know Deborah, but we've had multiple opportunities to connect. And I'm just super grateful that they have given us time to be here with them, honored. So I'll hand it over to Jody to give the purpose of our webinar.
Good evening, everyone. And if you want to also put in the chat where you're watching from, it's always nice to hear that and see that. Yeah, I'm so excited for this evening as well. And we created, or I should say, Misha created the webinar and then asked me to join on and be a co-facilitator with her. And the webinar was created to engage in honest and authentic conversations about the longtime injustice of racism in America. During the webinars, we discussed systemic racism in an effort to dismantle white supremacy. People use different terms regarding white supremacy. Some people have said, well, we don't like that term because it still is putting whites first, because that supremacy word. So some people prefer white crimes, white violence, white hatred. So we're kind of using them all to honor that from the inside out. Our intention with these webinars is to participate in sustainable action and highlight
our intention.
Our intention, yes, and highlight the voices of Black and Brown, Indigenous, and people of color community members, giving them a safe space to be heard about their own experiences, challenges, and hopes without the need to educate white people. And also our purpose is to provide resources to increase everyone's ability to self-educate towards being a more learned participant in the social justice movement. So we'll actually be providing links. You'll get an email after the webinar that provides links to a whole bunch of different resources that we've compiled and others have given us throughout our time doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we've got people here from Los Angeles and from Canyon, California. Thank you, welcome. And then also, y'all, you can, those of you who are attending, you can, if you look at your chat, you should have an option to either message hosts and panelists or message everyone. Would love it if you would message everyone so that people can feel involved and engaged and connected. So I'm going to share my screen and just give you a little introduction to our panelists. And I always forget to enter full screen. So welcome. Obviously, we are with Cecilia. Oh, Cecilia, I forgot. Mzvondiwa? Mzvondiwa?
Oh, yeah, that's very
Mzvondiwa.
good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Deborah Nelson. And we're going to just give a little introduction here to Deborah. Fabulous photo. Deborah Nelson is a retired educator and author who has dedicated her life to her family. And there's a little bar here that I can't see past, to the inner city school communities that she served. Raised as a preacher's daughter in Iowa, Ms. Nelson received a Bachelor's of Arts degree from California State University in Sacramento and a master's degree from National University. She served as principal at David Lubin Elementary School and Parkway Elementary Schools, both in Sacramento. On December 14th, 2010, geez, Deborah, I get all choked up every time. I've read this 3 times. Deborah's youngest child, Monique Roxanne Nelson, was tragically murdered in Sacramento, California. In honor of her beloved daughter, Deborah wrote a memoir entitled The Last Portrait, a Psalm for Monique. It is a riveting account of an extremely inspirational journey of life, love lost, and a mother's desperate struggle to fight her way out of the black hole of grief and heartache. You'll be fascinated to learn about her unbelievable journey from anger to healing to advocacy. Thank you, Deborah, for being here. Hi to you. And I will read the bio for Cecilia. Cecilia Mzvondiwa, Mzvondiwa.
Wow.
Will you say it for me, Cecilia?
Good for you, Misha. Yes, you got it. So Mzvondiwa Mzvondiwa. Yeah, you got it.
Mzvondiwa. Okay. Lawyer, training and development professional, and coach. Thank you for your grace. She was born and raised in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia. She attended the University of Zimbabwe and obtained a Bachelor of Arts dual honors in philosophy and religion in 2000. She taught history and religion at the Dominican Covenant High School. She then moved to Canada, end of 2001. In Canada, she pursued her education and obtained a master's degree in human security and peace building from Royal Roads University in Victoria, BC. She then enrolled into law school and obtained a Bachelor of Law degree from the University of South Africa in 2014. She then worked on the conversion process to obtain her Canadian law degree equivalency through the Federal Law Societies of Canada, then did her article to practice law in Canada. Cecilia is a lifelong learner. She has worked as a human resource professional with Alberta Health Services, lived in Grand Prairie since 2006, and she's been actively involved in both the local and international communities in different ways. Cecilia is a mom, a lawyer, a human rights activist, and identifies as Black. Her decision to participate in this webinar was to promote safe and inclusive spaces. And she also asked, I actually asked her first, can we promote your book? And she said yes. Yeah. So welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for bringing your beautiful beings here and sharing space with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You want to introduce yourself?
I'll be brief here. My name again is Jody Lewis. I am an attorney. I work for a nonprofit representing survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence, and I've worked with survivors for quite a while now. And yeah, just one of my many reasons for doing the webinar is as someone that is white. I know that my ancestors have had privileges because of our skin color, and that I, as a white person, have remained silent too long. And so I have done a lot of education for myself and connecting and being part of this webinar that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just quickly say, my name is Misha Safran. We are in Martinez, California. Sitting next to my beautiful fiance. I'm a late bloomer. I came out late in life, but I've raised 5 children. I was a teacher for 30 years, teaching French and Spanish, and I'm now self-employed and working as a coach, trainer, facilitator. And I also just published a book that I'm very excited about, but that's not about me tonight. So I want to say I stand for all people who are underserved, underprivileged, and marginalized. And I also believe that when we can use our voice, we need to. And when we need to bring our voices back so others can use their voices, we need to. So without further ado, it is to you. So welcome.
So excited to have you both.
Yeah. And again, those of you in the chat, please feel free to put loving comments in, welcome our guests, and anybody on Facebook, YouTube also. You can ask questions. We can't promise they'll be answered, but feel free to put them out there and perhaps we can answer them in an email afterwards. And we will connect with all of y'all soon. So 11 minutes in, it's your stage now. We're done. Zoop. Go, Deborah.
Evening. My name is Deborah Nelson. I'm a retired educator. I'm a proud mother of 3 beautiful children. I'm a grandmother to 5 gorgeous grandbabies and a community volunteer. As an educator, I taught a 5th, 6th grade combination class for 8 years, and I was an elementary school principal for 17 years. First and foremost, I want to thank Misha and Jody for providing a safe environment where we can address this complex issue of systemic racism. How can solutions be made to a problem that affects all of us if we don't get involved, if we don't participate, and if we don't have a certain level of understanding? Systemic racism is a national problem, and it is woven into the very fabric of this country. However, we have politicians and lawmakers who want to make it illegal for us to even discuss this topic in our schools today. And I don't even know very many churches or community programs that deal with it. And it's not discussed or clarified in many American homes today. So where do we go to have this important dialogue? So once again, thank you so much for making the injustices that racism manifests a priority in your webinars. I am here today because I am very, very concerned about how systemic racism negatively impacts children of color and children of poverty in this country. We thought we had solved this issue many, many years ago, but the current state of affairs in America today and the progress we thought we had made in the civil rights movement seems to be going backwards. What's that cliche? Those who want to learn their history and don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. And I want to add a little caveat to that cliche. Those who do not learn the true and accurate facts about this country are doomed to repeat it. You see, I'm a dinosaur, and I have lived through so many social changes in this country, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can remember being a child and eating at the dinner table, and our parents were constantly reinforcing the importance of education to us. A good education is going to open doors for you. A good education is a solution to all of our problems. Therefore, a school should be a place where we teach young people how to think. We provide them with the facts, facilitate their learning so they can synthesize, analyze, infer, deduct, and interpret that information in an intelligent manner. But how can young people today find the solutions to the problems that face them if we don't give them the true and accurate facts? We only give them that warm and fuzzy stuff that makes white people feel comfortable. I can remember being the only Black student in 7th grade class at JB Young Middle School in Davenport, Iowa. My teacher was teaching a history lesson, and she had this black and white photo of a plantation in the antebellum South with the mistress, the master, their children, and a group of Black slaves displayed at the bottom of their porch. And this teacher proudly held this picture up and she said, "See, I told you. Slavery wasn't that bad. Look how the slaves are singing and dancing and laughing in this picture." Inside my head, I was choking the hell out of that dim-wit teacher. But in reality, I said nothing. Being the only Black student in the classroom, I felt humiliated, embarrassed, very uncomfortable. but they didn't care. So inside my head, I was thinking, am I the only person in this classroom that knows that if these slaves didn't sing and dance on cue for massa, that they are going to be violently beaten? What freaking choice did they have? But that's the America that we live in today. That's what the DeSantises of America want. They want us to teach history that makes white people feel all warm and fuzzy inside and not the truth. Do you think I felt all warm and fuzzy inside when that teacher lied in that classroom? Do you think people of color feel all warm and fuzzy inside when they have to experience systemic racism in this country? I think not. Let's talk about systemic racism in the school system. I have had many experiences in the public school system dealing with racism. My first assignment as an elementary school principal was at a very affluent school. It was 85% white, 9% Hispanic, and 6% African American. It was the highest achieving school in the district with the highest rate of parent participation. And I was their very first African American principal to ever set foot on that campus. The turning point for me at that school was when a group of white parents organized and advocated to have 50 Black and brown students who were bused in daily from inner city school removed from the school because they were negatively impacting their standardized test scores. My next assignment as an elementary school principal was at an inner city school on the other side of town. And the demographics there was 70% of the kids were African American, 30% of the kids were Hispanic, and 100% of the kids were on free and reduced lunch. This was the lowest achieving school in the district. And the community that we served had the highest rate of violence, the highest rate of drug abuse, the highest rate of child molestation in the county. These scholars suffered from PTSD because of the level of gun violence that they had experienced in their young lives. Every system in this school was broken, and the school population was considered the stepchildren or the expendables to the district. Now, there is a plethora of dichotomies that I could highlight between these two public schools, but it would take all day. So I'm just going to provide you with a couple examples of how systemic racism looks in the school system. The miseducation of children of color and children of poverty in the public school system is not an accident or a misstep. It is by design. Slaves were killed if they learned to read or write. Schools in this nation were legally segregated until the victory of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. So do you think with the passage of this bill that white America all of a sudden had a change of heart and educating children of color became a priority for them? Think again. The US student population today is more diverse than ever before, but our public schools are more segregated today by racial, ethnic, and social economic lines. Why? Because of programs like the voucher program, magnet schools, private schools, charter schools, schools that make their own rules and regulations. The U.S. Accountability Office said that a third of the student population, that's about 18.5 million students, still are attending same race, same ethnicity schools. This means that a large portion of our minority students are still attending segregated schools with less resources, so they cannot get a quality education. Separate has never been equal. Racism in the school district is by design, by using historical practices like redlining, which segregates neighborhoods, or district secession, where a school can pull away from a district and have their own private privileged white enclave. The second part of the program today, I'm going to discuss how systemic racism looks in the classroom. But at this time, I have the honor and the privilege of passing the torch to the esteemed Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Yeah,
wow. Thank you. Some very important, and there's some message in the chat that says very poignant and powerful. You know, and that's something I forgot to mention at the beginning of this. And Cecilia, I promise I'll get right back to you. There is this huge thing around comfort, the need to be comfortable. right? And that's one of the things that Jody and I have been working on all the last 3 years. In fact, there were times where we'd be walking somewhere or reading something or listening to something, and we'd want to stop and like, no, wait a minute. We're just identifying right now, we have a choice to either be comfortable or uncomfortable. And we've decided to actually be uncomfortable and continue to practice that, because as you know, I don't have to tell you that people that have darker skin, they don't have a choice to be comfortable. It's a 24/7 uncomfortable. And there are things like the singing and the dancing that the slaves did to try to add in a little bit of joy, to tolerate, to assimilate, to be able to have something, right? And so it's really important, people on this webinar and people on Facebook and everywhere. I'm not gonna say who it is, but somebody in the chats here that we know was a panelist last month. But I want to just say that if you're listening, wherever you are, practice being in the uncomfortable, embrace it. It's hard as hell, but a lot of people have the choice and a lot of people don't. So just want to put that out there. Thank you so much, Deborah. Cecilia.
Thank you. I was so much in the zone, and I'm like, just continue, Deborah. Thank you so much for your, speaking truth to power and being so vulnerable. And I'm inspired by your story. I think where I might start from is just identifying that myself, I was born in Africa. And so my experience is a little different. But I taught history, and I learned history and taught history, and we were taught the slave trade, African history, and then European history. And so reading about it was different from hearing this lived experiences of people when I moved over to this other side of the country, of the continent. And of course, and I had, except for colonialism, knowing that we were colonized by the British and they were the minority, we were still majority Black. I was marked by this issue of racial discrimination and racism when I came to Canada 22 years ago. And I think, Debbie, you had mentioned, I thought Canada was good. And the problem is in the United States. Canadians like to think that way, but now they are recognizing that, no, it's not just an American problem. It's not just a Canadian problem. It is a global problem. And one of the things that, and I do talk about it in my book, is that I truly believe that as a human race, until and unless we recognize that we are one human race, we are still to be civilized. So one of the things that I when I was thinking about what would I share was, like I said, this being caught by surprise about being treated as the other and different when I came to Canada, because mostly we read about Canada as this multicultural country, leading the way, peace-loving, peacemaking, everything else. Canadians very polite, excuse me, I'm sorry, thank you. and drinking Tim Hortons, that I do now, I'm Canadian. But I think that what we experience here is what somebody said the other day is death by 1,000 cuts. Because the Canadians will be very polite in your face, and then the racism is insidious. It's under the current. So myself as a human rights lawyer, I know very difficult to challenge, because it becomes this nebulous thing of he said, she said, and nothing really tangible, but you can feel it. And I think you just said it, Misha, that, when I wake up, I have no choice of looking different. I just have to come out as Black. And Deborah, you talked about school. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and 3 weeks ago she came home and she was taking the wipes, trying to wipe her face. And I'm like, Mia, what are you doing? And she said, I want to be white. So then I was caught by surprise and I didn't know how to respond. I said, oh, and so what color are you? She said, I'm brown. And then she said, I want to be white and I want to have blue eyes. And I'm like, oh, what color are your eyes? She said, they're brown and I hate them. I want them to be blue. So then I'm like, what? Where could a 4-year-old get this? She goes to pre-K, so obviously something must have been said in school. So for me, it was really sad reality of, okay, one of the reasons why I do what I do is in the hope that my daughter and our grandkids will have a much better world than we have had. But I think we are still far away. While we have moved, the dial in some ways, but we haven't really moved so far. I worked for a company that I worked for 15 years. It was 14 years until May 25th of 2020, the George Floyd murder. And I realized that for 15 years, I was invisible and not seen, and had all these, because something was triggered in me. I cried for 3 hours, cried nonstop after we had the march in our city in solidarity with the murder of George Floyd. And I came home and I was like, why am I so sad? Why am I crying this hard? And realized for the first time that a lot of things were going on and I had taken them as a norm in order to survive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So things like in my position at work, I held a managerial position, and many times people would be sent, they want to see a manager, and they come to me and I'm like, I still want to see a manager. I'm like, I am the manager. And I thought, okay, maybe it's one of those things. And then when I got my license and I was going to court, I experienced some things where people would look at me and say, what is your case? Case number, like what crime have you committed? And not that I'm representing somebody. So I found I had to legitimize myself all the time in situations to kind of try to explain, no, I am a lawyer too. No, I am the manager. No, I'm this, so or that. And because I was just trying to survive, masking and trying to fit in all the time, I didn't realize how much it was taking away from me until that day of George Floyd. And I was triggered and realized what had happened to me. So a lot of when we talk, I think I walked around as an angry Black woman for a long time. And I was like, get out of my way. I'm here too. You need to see me. And then I had to do a lot of inner work and reflect and say, I will not get far by doing that. So what can I do different to put the message across, but also to try and educate people, because some of it I actually think it is sad ignorance, but also I have learned when I was doing my inner work that some of the things that drive racism is, our minds too, because our subconscious is very strong. So depending on how we are raised in our families, what we are taught in our schools, in our communities, our minds are designed to protect us. So whatever looks different is a potential threat to the mind. Mm-hmm. And what looks the same is a potential comfort and safety. And so that is one of the things that helped me a little bit to come from that angry Black woman to say, okay, because I had to find my own biases in some things. So for example, where I grew up in Zimbabwe, it is illegal to be gay or lesbian. You actually get jailed. And I was raised by the Catholics. And it is a sin from the Catholic Church perspective, although Catholic priests have abused boys many times, which is the irony of. So this is how I was brought. So when I came to Canada and realized the difference, at first I found myself being scared. And then I said, okay, I'm a good person, well-meaning person. So how come I have this fear? Then I realized that our minds are very powerful. How we get taught and what we get to learn in our when we are growing up is what carries us. Similarly, when I traveled to Canada, I traveled and I landed on November 21st, 2001. That was like just under 2 months after 9/11. Mm. So many times after that, when I was traveling, when somebody who had a hijab came close to me, I thought, I hope they have no bomb. Right? So then I have to catch myself, and I travel lots. And one time I traveled from Vancouver to Auckland, which is 14 hours nonstop. And then I sat next to a Muslim woman who had not just the hijab, but they had the big black gown, just you could just see the eyes. Mm. And I thought, my God, 14 hours of fear, just fearing, thinking, does she have a bomb in? So I had to interrogate my fear and say, okay, 9/11 was a reality. It does trigger some fear in me, but it doesn't always mean that every Muslim carries a bomb and their intention is to bring down the plane. So how do I overcome this fear now in me? Was to have a conversation with this lady. And we ended up having a beautiful conversation. She was a beautiful human being, traveling to see family and all that. So one of the things that inspired me to write the book was about, okay, there is this human thing in us that makes us separate and put people in categories. You're Black, you're white, you're brown, you're gay, you're lesbian, you are a woman, I'm a man, or you are old, I'm young, all these sorts of differences that we put in our world. We need to interrogate ourselves. I think you talked about leaning into the discomfort, because it's about when we find ourselves being uncomfortable. I had to think hard and to say, am I racist too? Because when I go in most of my jobs, I was the only Black, like you shared, Deborah. And then when I go back to my Black community, they're like, oh, you hang out with these white people. Then I was like, okay. So I'm not white, I am Black, but my own community doesn't accept me. So where do I belong? So sometimes then the struggle becomes real because of these categories that we have put, and we see the other, each other, not as fellow human beings, but as the other, right? So those are some of the things that I think about when I think about systemic racism. I think that the impact and the effects are real. I work with Indigenous people here, and some of the stories, especially when I hear about the residential schools system and the experiences, and when the unmarked graves of kids were found, I just like, what happens to the human heart? Because the human heart is this potential to love and this potential to be evil. So what happens that we become that? And I think of it in terms of when I was reading stories about slave trade, when these people were captured and they were in the catacombs waiting to get into the boats, and moving these steam ships, and if you were weak because you were hungry or sick, and then you were thrown into the sea to die. These are horrible, horrible things to think about, the potential of evil in human beings. And I just wonder, that's why I think that unless and until we see ourselves as one human race, we are still far away from civilization, because our design as human beings, even the design of the planets, the design of the universe is based on diversity. Right? There's no one planet that's the same as the other. Our human bodies, the eyes are not the same as the nose, nor the mouth. We are all designed on diversity, and it should be something that we celebrate and are happy about. But we have used it as a weapon to divide and conquer, which is unfortunate. And I know I can get very passionate and go on and on, but I just wanted to bring the different thoughts that have brought me into this space of thinking about what can we do to move the dial towards bringing ourselves to the fact that we're all human? Because as far as I'm concerned, we have the same, there's no human being who has no white and red blood cells. Every one of us wants to be loved and to be accepted, to be seen for who we are, not to be seen for who somebody wants us to be. Because for the longest time, I thought, I need to be lighter, maybe do like Michael Jackson, change my skin color because I'm so dark. Or I need to have straight hair so that But now I'm trying to teach my daughter that, you know what, it's good to be Black. You don't need to go tanning, honey, you're fine. We have, hair that's like this, but you can do funky hairstyles. Look at how Debbie is looking all beautiful and so I think those are some of the things, because I'm a person of Christian belief, and I still have hope. Even though the reality can be dark and stark, I still hold on to the hope that we can do it. So I want to stop here and send it back to Deb.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you. Powerful.
Yeah. And I just want to point out real quickly, something you said is really important. And this is a huge distinction. Fear drives hatred.
Oh, yeah.
Fear drives exclusion. And you're very different from white people who have so much fear that they cast hate and violence on others, in the sense that you just stated very clearly, oh, I had to kind of look at this and understand, where is this coming from? And that you were willing to engage in conversation with this beautiful Muslim woman instead of sitting in your fear and creating more stories that would then catapult you into some other horrible direction. And so this is a part of systemic racism, right? Where people have been living in fear, threatened about this is why xenophobia exists, threatened that foreigners are going to take people's jobs. There's plenty of jobs for everybody. So as a beautiful human being, we still have our judgments and preconceived notions and our fears based on experiences and teachings. And the step we have, the opportunity we have, and why we also do this webinar, is to help that mind shift, to know that let's assume positive intent instead of negative. Let's assume a positive being, a heart-centered human, instead of somebody who has intention to hurt and to violate. Right? So thank you for sharing that deep honesty around your own experiences with judgment or racism or, and bias, because we all have it. We all have bias. There is not one person in this world that has never had a moment of bias, right? It's natural. It's a human tendency. But what we do with it after we notice it is the important thing. So you want to add something real quickly, or?
No, I want to put it back.
Go ahead. Go, Deborah.
Deborah.
You
I don't
go.
want to take more time.
Before I get started, Cecilia, I have to say you are a beacon of light in this darkness. And I just loved what you said, everything you said, and the honesty and straight from your heart, and so I appreciate you. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
Systemic racism in the school system negatively impacts children of color and children of poverty. And they must experience biases each and every day in the school system. Biases such as, number one, they are disciplined more harshly. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white counterparts. Why? Because of implicit biases that some teachers have in regards to students of color. And they see them as troublemakers, or they buy into the negative image of them in the media. And these excessive absences results in the lack of instruction and the inability for them to get a quality education. Number 2, children of color are less likely to be identified for gifted programs. Why? Because of the implicit biases that some teachers have in regards to children of color and not being able to identify their strengths and their talents. But the number 1 reason is because most schools only use one criteria to measure the intelligence of a child, and that is a standardized test. The standardized tests, the most effective racist weapon ever used to degrade the minds of Black and brown children. Why? Because they legally omit them from going to prestigious schools or even being identified for gifted programs. Standardized tests are racially, culturally, and socioeconomically biased. 3, children of color are less likely to have access to quality teachers. This was my greatest challenge as an inter-school principal. It was an educating the kids from the hood. It was dealing with a toxic, dysfunctional staff that I had inherited. It was common practice for the district to dump all the dysfunctional staff in the district into inner city schools. Why? Because they regard these students as expendables. There is no parent participation, so there's no one to keep the administration in check. And there is no accountability because in their tainted minds, the reason for school failure is the kids themselves. Blame the victim for the failure of the school. Those kids can't learn their mother's a drug addict. Those kids can't learn their daddy's a gang member. Those kids can't be motivated. They're Black and poor, and on and on and on. But in reality, all children can learn. And in order to accelerate the rate of learning, in order to close that achievement gap, we must develop the most highly effective, best trained teachers that we can in our communities. And once we identify those highly effective teachers that get results, personally, I feel they should get paid more money than the average teacher because the work is more demanding. I always told my teachers, you cannot educate a child that you despise or that you are afraid of. And you must hold yourself accountable for the rate of learning in your classroom and maintain high expectations, not only for yourself, but for each and every student in your classroom. Why? Because I have never, ever, ever, ever seen a child that has risen to low expectations. Thank you so much for your time. And to my sister, now Cecilia.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Deborah. Because one of the things that I truly believe is, using education to change mindsets. And, what I was, as you were talking, I'm like, oh, I should reach out to Deborah so that we can continue the conversation of, how do we find those teachers and how do we train them differently? What you said, which was so powerful to me, was you cannot educate a child that you despise or are afraid of. And yet I believe the future is our young people, our children. And we cannot wait for that future. The future is now. We have to create it now. So that's really something that resonates. So when you were talking about standardized tests, I was just smiling because, going through law school, we had to write LSAT. Jody, I hated that. This was the first exam. I am a person who was born loving school. I used to always have very good grades. But when I wrote that test, I thought, what an evil exam. Because I thought, okay, I passed. Fortunately, I passed, but when I looked at who failed in the room that we were sitting in, I found it was mostly people who were visible minorities. Then I didn't want to believe that we were less intelligent. I said, I think there is something wrong with this test. And then the same theory continued to when we were doing, because here in Canada, they replaced the bar exam with a different kind of exam. So there's 4 provinces that do the same exam. And when I did it, it was 30% of the people failed. And when I looked at who failed, the kind of bar exam, it was, again, Black, Indians, Filipinos, and others. I was lucky to have passed it because I'm old. I'm just like, I need this out of my way. I can't afford to fail. I have a child to look after. But it again made me think about these standardized tests are not designed. They are not a mistake. They are designed. They're doing what they were designed to do. And these are the things. When we talk about systemic racism, we need to think about how do we dismantle that and say, what are we really measuring when we are using some of these standard tests? Then the other thing too that I just wanted to talk about, when you talked about implicit bias, I've sat for 16 years in a chair of hiring, yes, Mia. So she woke up and she's, Mama, So we would receive resumes, and if I wasn't shortlisting, there would never be a resume with these difficult names like mine. And then I had to ask my colleagues. I said, it always surprises me that we don't have people shortlisted for interviews. Why? And they say, well, we don't know that they would be able to speak English and do the work. So those are some of the things that I've seen when I was talking about racism in Canada. It's really rife. It's here. And we need to think about it. And I want to send it back to you, ladies. And then I just answered to Mia here. She's calling.
Okay. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Deborah, did you want to add anything after hearing Cecilia? Well,
Not at all, but she's
Better?
talking my language. I mean, we're right in the same place, okay? And like she said, it's not just an American problem, but it's a global problem. And until we, like I said, teach the true and accurate facts, and unless we are uncomfortable, change does not come unless you're uncomfortable. If you're comfortable, you are not going to stretch into something else. Okay, so I have no problem making people feel uncomfortable.
good for you.
Yeah.
Cecilia, you're back. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in my other capacity, I work for the government of Alberta here as a hate crimes community liaison. And in that position, we also, Mia, say hi. We look at the global trend on hate crimes and hate incidents. And it is a global world, and something that really is a concern in terms of course, it's a kind of an extension of racism. It's an extension of one can be hated for many different things, and hate online is growing as well. So that's why we need to act and deal with some of this, because when discrimination is not dealt with, it grows into hate, and hate is more heinous and egregious when we have those hateful acts of people being shot and things like that. So that's what I just wanted to add.
Thank you. Hi, Mia. Yeah, thank you so much.
If there's any questions or comments, please go ahead and put in the chat. We do have some comments in there. Quite a bit of comments, actually.
Yeah, I don't want to read the privacy of certain people, but the names, but we've had a comment in the chat of someone else having been from South Africa of Indian ancestry, left as an adult and now living in the USA for 30 years. Also came here believing the myth of American dream, but to realize the American apartheid system is no different, possibly worse from the South African system. Sad face, yes. Death by 1,000 cuts, leaving South Africa. We thought we were leaving racism behind, but sadly not. Now this person is an activist in rural upstate New York area speaking about racism that exists here. And thank you for your service to that person. Typically, folks, we don't mention the names of the people that are attendees unless you say it's okay to mention your name. So, you can always add that to the chat, but we just reserve your names to be anonymous. And then another person, there was a response from Cecilia, just thank you and great to see you, my neighbor, but also that apartheid in South Africa is similar to the system used in Canada with Indigenous groups. And then another comment came in around the educational comments that you were making, Deborah. This person said, completely agree, and those kids are not emotionally mature enough to always make positive decisions. So it's just, it's and at the same time, there are actually a lot of kids who are mature enough, but they're not given the space or the safety just to say what they need to say. They feel dismissed and negated. I remember, honestly, I was doing some work with a school that was going to charter, and the students were coming up against the process, and a lot of the board were basically saying that the kids were only speaking from what their parents said. And I had to stand up and say, could we please give these kids more credit? I've been a teacher here for so many years, and I know these kids have voices that are also not their parents. And so it's like remembering that kids do have ways to say what they need to say, but sometimes they need an adult to be strong enough to give them that space to say it. until they learn how to say it in a way that maybe is more respectful or whatever. But again, that's also systemic racism and white supremacy. Having people have to act and say certain things a certain way is, we have to watch out for that. So, Deborah. Yeah.
So may I say one thing about global racism? I learned something and it blew me away because, of course I bought into America, the land of the free. This is my country. I love my country, right? But when I studied the Holocaust and the Nazis in Germany, and I learned that Hitler got a lot of his strategies to exterminate Germans and Jews and the disabled and people of color in Germany from our Jim Crow laws here in America. And he said he couldn't even use some of them because they were just too cruel. For Hitler to say that about the racism here in America, I mean, this is a wake-up call. And you want to teach, warm and fuzzy stuff? No, we've got a reckoning here. We have some truths that we have to face. Before you can solve a problem, you have to admit there is a problem. And that's where I see America today. We've got a lot of problem solving, and we won't be able to do it unless we tell the truth.
Right. And people are wanting to erase history. I mean, people are trying to say the Holocaust never existed, that slavery never existed. Yes. And yes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I visited Tennessee a year ago and saw some of those plantations, right? And yeah, it's just it's unbelievable, like I said, the reality of it seems so far away, but yet it's not so long ago. And then of course we have moved, like I said before, but we still have so much more to do. And one of the things though that I had thought about, I need to mention in before we finish is to my fellow Black brothers and sisters, right? Because I can only speak as a Black person right here, is that while I really acknowledge, that's a weaker word, but the experiences that Black people have suffered and continue to suffer, I also want to invite us, right, to say we have it in our minds, the power is in our minds to say, this happened to us, and I'm not diminishing it or not taking it away, but to say, where do we want to go from here? Do we want to stay in this victim mode, or do we want to do something about this to kind of go towards a few steps further to where we want to go? I know there's so many barriers. That's why we want to say, let's dismantle the systemic racism, because systems are functioning the way they were designed. But what can we do? Because I think the greatest, what it does to us is that we have put ourselves, we were told this is our place, and some of us have stayed there. So how do we help each other? How do we help ourselves to move away and say, okay, no, I'm not defined by this. The true Cecilia is what God designed me to be. So I think that's one of the biggest to shift our own minds as well, because it's very difficult to get to work against that, what we have been told all along. So that's one of the things I wanted just to add.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, and I know that you've been chomping at the bit too. I'd just like to throw out there, instead of or, I think they can both exist. I think it's really important for Black people, Brown people, Indigenous people to be able to say, I'm a survivor or I've been a victim to this, and how can I move forward? Mm-hmm. And where do we go from here? Yeah. Because I think in that case, you're allowing both to exist. Yeah. Because it's a horrible experience. It's not okay. And so I think that the challenge is, not falling into that victim mode, but also still being able to have a space to say, this is wrong.
Oh,
this
yes.
Feel good to me.
Yeah.
And not, how to move on away. Like I had family members with concentration numbers on their, branded on their bodies from the concentration camps. So it's like being able to say, this happened, this is not okay. Mm-hmm. And this is where I want to be and where I want to go and how I want to get there. right? So it's a coexistence, right?
That's beautiful, Misha. You have put it in a better way than I would have. I think because then we can't negate the reality of what has happened. Denying it will not help. But like I said, like you say, that it's then where do we go from here?
Yeah. Both of you, thank you so much. Just powerful, and language is so important. And I think Deborah is saying expendable, or like students being expendable, and that's how we're treating Black and brown students and students of color, Indigenous students, and it's all throughout, right? Even when we get to higher education, we look at, even there's a question in the chat too, where do we go from here? That's the $50,000 question. And when we have a Supreme Court that's looking at striking down affirmative action and say that you can't tell your race story when you do your application is crazy. We all have a race story. And anyone, Strict Scrutiny has a podcast out, you listen to it. They did a segment on this. And I think it was one of the female justices asked a question, and it was a really valid point regarding, you have one applicant that can talk about, well, my family has come here been at the school for generations, and we come from wealth and all this different things. They can tell that story, but another candidate can't tell the story that I'm first generation coming here because my parents were enslaved, right? And that's what this country is doing when we continue to do systemic racism, right? And we continue to be in that piece. And Deborah, your point regarding segregation of schools, School Colors is another podcast that really has dissected schools in New York City, and really shows like parents not wanting schools to become desegregated, because they think that if kids come in, their students have to be bused, and there's all these excuses regarding looking at schools and making them more diverse and giving funding to all schools in that. But that piece of, that we're making people expendable, and really that piece. And I read a lot regarding that word plantation. We should not be calling plantation. This country like reveres plantations. No, they were labor camps. They were forced labor camps. And, I've heard people use that. And to me, I think we should be using that language. And it shouldn't be places where people go for vacation and glorify it. And that's part of what this country did right from the start. This country did that, because the country was so divided, and they wanted, the president and everyone wanted to bring the country together. It really just made it like, oh, everything's good. And no, like it was based on, this country was based on economically, right, on the backs of Black and brown people and Indigenous people on that piece. And just to tie up like that piece, we are a human race, and until we can come together and see each other as people, we're going to continue to be this until we speak the truth about racism and our past history, and use words like enslaved and labor camps and et cetera. That's that question of where do we go from here? We need to talk about it as the truth of it to move forward and connect and look at us as human races, and acknowledge, like Cecilia, you did, regarding our own biases and how that plays out, and do what you beautifully did and said, no, let me connect. Let us connect with each other and see each other as humans and move forward from there. And now we want to let Cecilia talk about her book.
And we're running short on time. So I just want to give a couple of like, what's it called? Logistics. So we want Cecilia to be able to talk about her book, which has already come out. We're going to put a link in the chat for everyone. And then we're going to actually stop the live stream and stop the recording. And anybody who is here, so sorry, Facebook and YouTube people, but anybody who's here in the webinar can actually come raise your virtual hand, and we'll bring you on camera with us and unmute you and unvideo you so you can actually join us. But we want to honor our panelists' time, and we're going to be done no later than 16 minutes from now. So we're going to do all this kind of quickly, but I definitely want on the recording for Cecilia to be able to put a plug in for your beautiful book. And so go ahead, Cecilia, and I'll put the link in the chat for everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, and I'm excited because it's my first. So, this is my book. It's entitled Beyond Tokenism. So I just, I know a lot of people are making noise in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there's a lot of also, things that are being done to put a check mark. So in the book, I am challenging us and people to say, let's actually talk about this in a way that's more meaningful. And I emphasize creating a sense of belonging and being inclusive leaders. And I know we are all leaders. And so how do we create the sense of belonging for everyone? And in the book, I talk about diversity in all its entirety in terms of where, in the workplace, we have almost about 5 generations now. So how do we accept the different generations, people that we live with, work with? We have gender, we have disability. A lot of people who live with disability now, and we tend to forget that. People who experience homelessness, people who are of different ethnic backgrounds, people who think differently from us, neurodiversity. So how do we embrace all those people so that when we work with people or when we interact with others, we just appreciate the human being that they are without wanting them to be different. So that's what I talk about. And I'm happy to say so far the book has been received well. The town of Grand Prairie has just endorsed it for its employers, and 2 colleges have adopted it for their curriculum. So yes, so I'm really excited about that because it was my COVID project and inspired by the sacrifice that George Floyd gave, and also my own lived experiences of what it has been for me to live in a country where I was different, and then so this is the book, but I also have a diversity and inclusion consultancy. I see the link there. So I'm partnered with about 4 very great people that are housed in different continents. So we are in New Zealand, the United States, and the UK, and doing some programs with neat, organizations like the BBC, Wells Fargo in the US and other areas, and here in Canada with different organizations as well. And then of course, I do own a law firm, and I have said I want my law firm to be different. Jody would relate to this. People have a love-hate relationship with lawyers. When everything is going on well, they're like, those lawyers, they are liars. They are, they're expensive. When something goes wrong, I call my lawyer. So I practice heart-centered law where when I meet my clients, it's about meeting them where they are and, walking beside them and not just focusing on legalese and the money, but on what, working with them so that whatever brought them to me will not break them, but they come out strong. So that's how I practice law. And so you can check out my website there for law. And of course, the book is available on Amazon. The more purchases we make on Amazon, then it can become a bestseller. And that way, I believe in the power of sisterhood. I have been supported lots by my sisters here, by Misha and Jody, by Pat, I see Melody, people who have supported me. And it's been great just to meet Deborah. And I believe that the future is also women. So if we had more women ruling this world, we would have less wars and stuff like that. But that's a conversation for another day. I just thank you so much.
Wonderful, Cecilia.
Thanks, Debbie, for being on the panel with me. I'm humbled to share the stage with you, and I would like to continue the relationship afterward.
Likewise, and I want to talk to your daughter and let her know how wonderful she is. Just so.
And she's playing shy because she woke up. She was taking a nap. Look.
Well, when we stop recording, we'll
talk to her.
Come on. Let me just say real quickly. There was a comment on Facebook that said, "Happy to hear your book, Beyond Tokenism, and how well received it has been. Congrats." And those of you who are not in Canada, the link is going to Amazon for Canada. You can look up the title and Cecilia's name on any Amazon, and you should be able to locate it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say goodbye to the people on Facebook. Bye, Facebook.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye, YouTube. And I'm going to stop the recording and stop the live stream so that anybody who is here can